Welcome to another episode of Upstate and Litigate. I'm one of your hosts, John DeGasperis. I'm a partner at the law office of Basch Keegan LLP. This is a video cast about all things legal, as long as it pertains to the Hudson Valley.
I'm Derek Spada, also a partner at Basch Keegan, and today we have a special episode with a special guest. We'll be talking about how workers' compensation law and personal injury law intersect, merge, and diverge in some ways. Our special guest today is longtime workers' compensation attorney based in Kingston and Schenectady as well, Ralph Kirk.
Ralph, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on the show.
You are our first non-Basch Keegan guest. So thank you. We felt
I consider it an honor, and
congratulations.
hopefully I'll be up for the task.
Yeah, I think you'll be fine. I've never known you to be short for words. And so usually we go into an opening statement where Derek and I would brag about some recent victory, but today we want to brag about you. And maybe we just ask you to introduce yourself to our viewers, tell them a little bit about your profession as a workers' compensation attorney and your story.
Well, I came to Kingston in Ulster County January of 1978. I've been representing workers, injured workers, their families ever since. The first attorney I worked for, William Mullaney, he handled workers' compensation claims, taught me the ropes, and frankly, he was a good teacher. I tried to be a good student, and we did a general practice for the first period of time, and that, I think, enabled me to get to know all of the Ulster County Bar Association, also to have interaction with them, whether it's criminal cases, personal injury cases, real estate transactions, and you get a sense of, they get a sense of you, you get a sense of them, and it all kind of worked well from there. But
I've always respected that you are a very active member of the Ulster County Bar Association, as well as many of the members of your law firm, and I think that's commendable. And we could always rely on you for some, just presence, which is important.
The Ulster County Bar Association is, I think, probably one of the best in the state. Right. I mean, when we honor some of the departed members, the Supreme Court judges come down, the appellate division judges come down, local counsel, and it's really quite an honor for everyone to get together and to pay homage. It really is. And
thank God there are no term limits, because Derek is now. Derek, how many times have you served as the president of the Ulster County Bar Association?
I've served 3 terms, not in a row. They've been spread out over about 12 years, but 3 terms spread out over 12 years. And there's a rumor that I might be coming back for a 4th term, whether I want to or not. And I certainly enjoy doing it.
You do a good job.
The bar, it's fun. We have a fun bar, great people here. We're lucky to have a great group of local attorneys.
When you do it well, they're going to come back here. Every time.
So, Ralph, I have a question for you.
Sure.
At Basch Keegan, we claim that we handle only accident and injury cases. And at some point in your career, did you make a choice that you were going to handle workers' compensation claims, that you were going to represent injured workers? Yeah,
without a question. About 10, 12 years in, essentially what I found was that workers' compensation, Social Security, disability, those were areas where I had an expertise. I could, in fact, help more people efficiently, effectively, and the need was there.
Where's your firm located right now?
10 Westbrook Lane. That's our main office. And, I started off, as I indicated, January of 1978, but went out on my own in 1980. It was interesting. I listened to the podcast with Eli, indicating he started with 2 secretaries that he took from Bosch and Kern. Well, actually, when I went out on my own, I had a part-time secretary, and my wife, Fran, she was a full-time student towards school psychology degree, and she would come and answer phones when she wasn't studying. And she also would actually count the index cards representing the number of clients that I had at the time.
Is that right?
Well, it is an interesting story, because now we have 7 attorneys, we have 4 licensed hearing representatives, we have a dozen paraprofessionals and other support staff, and we represent people throughout the state. But again, concentration Ulster County, Mid-Hudson Valley area.
Now, you do Social Security disability insurance claims as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. And when did that come around?
Oh, no, I've always done that.
Is that right? Okay.
From the start.
All right.
From the start. In fact, no one was representing people back in the late 70s, early 80s, as far as Social Security was concerned. But the need was there. Again, difficult to win cases at that point in time became a bit easier, and now it's a whole specialty in itself.
Yeah. What do you find to be most gratifying about representing injured people? I've known you to be a scrupulous negotiator when it comes to insurance companies, and I have been very impressed by the way that you advocate for your clients. You, from my perspective, are one of those individuals that refuses to let the insurance company take advantage of people. And I'm curious, what brings you gratification?
Well, look, there's no question that I have a passion for what I do. Representing injured workers and their families, I can think of no higher calling. I really can't. When a person's injured on the job, they need wage loss replacement, they need medical care, and the sooner they get it and the best possible wage loss replacement we can provide for them, it helps their families. And I personally consider it a privilege to be able to be part of that.
What issues or obstacles do you see injured workers face on a regular basis when they file a workers' compensation claim?
Yeah, probably the most important thing is for the claim to be filed correctly in the first instance. Okay, if someone's injured on the job, the first thing they have to do is notify their employer. But secondly, they have to file a written incident report with their employer. Now, I recommend make sure you keep a copy. In fact, usually copies aren't readily available. Take a picture of what you file. You don't want that to all of a sudden not get to the insurance carrier or for an employer to deny that it ever was filed. Next thing, got to go to the doctor. Go to the doctor, make sure a full work history as to what occurred and how it happened that's recorded in the first instance. Get a diagnosis. But every single injury site and condition has to be put down, and at least there's a history of it having been injured. If there's no diagnosis, if there's no particular problem, that's fine. But coming back to something that you never complained of in the first instance, that can be problematic.
This is something that Derek and I have talked about on other episodes of this show.
It's the same with personal injury.
Same in personal injury. Yeah. Gotta report it. Accident report is great. We can get by without it, but it's really important to have it. And you got to get timely medical treatment and get a concrete diagnosis. So that's a very interesting overlap. And I'll say this, as you know, we handle a lot of personal injury cases where there's an overlap in terms of a workers' compensation claim and what we call a third-party benefit. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I find that one of the first pieces of evidence or one of the first reference points that I want to look at is the employee's first report of incident. I want to see what was said organically before lawyers got involved, right after the incident. And if that is consistent with the claimant's claim, I think that's usually a nice, strong place to start.
No question. And it's that consistency that is absolutely essential.
Right.
When a claim comes into our office, often the case hasn't been indexed. Case may be filed, the insurance company may have a claim set up, but the board doesn't. So we don't know exactly what the injured worker, what history he provided to the employer. And we don't know necessarily what history he provided to the doctor.
Now, does the employee get to make the report or does the employer? Because something that I think Derek and I see from time to time is if you fall at, say, a Walmart and the Walmart employee is filling out the accident report, it may not be an accurate reflection of what the injured person went through. So I'm curious, who gets to make the report in workers' compensation claims?
It's difficult to say because probably half the time the employer gives the person an incident report they have in their office to fill out, sign, and then they send it into the insurance company. But oftentimes, especially if you've got a human resource department, the claimant goes to it reports the injury, and they fill it out based upon what the injured worker says.
Is there a time period within which these people need to report their injury?
Yeah, there's a 30-day time period within which to file a written notice of claim.
Okay.
but there are exceptions.
Oh, okay.
So, the notice issue is usually something we can get passed fairly easily.
Right. But it's something I would think you'd want them to
Oh.
report it as soon as possible, even if you have 30 days.
Immediately.
Yeah.
No
Right.
question.
At what point should an injured worker contact a lawyer about their claim? Should they call right away or wait until they have an issue and try it on their own first?
My personal preference is right after they see the doctor.
Yeah.
No, honestly, it's
You should have an
because-
advocate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the point of how to get their wage loss replacement taken care of and picked up as soon as possible, that's essential. Knowing what road to take as far as getting medical treatment and care, again, we talked initially about going to the doctor, whether it's urgent care, emergency room, but it's getting to a specialist. There's one major specialist group here in Ulster County. 30 years ago, it was a different one.
Right, right.
Kingston Neurological
Yeah,
had all the cases. Now it's Orthopedic Associates. So, but getting a case in their hands or in the hands of some doctor who understands compensation, accepts compensation, knows what forms to fill out, that's key.
Yeah. I have two questions. One, I want to talk about these nurse advocates or whatever, but I think we should take a step back for a moment and tell our viewers what is workers' compensation and what benefits can an injured worker expect if they file a workers' compensation claim.
Right. Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion regarding how our respective expertise areas intersect. So think about it. There's a lot of people get injured on the job. There's a fair number of people that get injured through the negligence of someone. It's a smaller number. And sometimes people get injured on the job and there's negligence.
Right.
That's where the intersect occurs.
So in New York State, you can't sue your employer if you're injured on the job, as long as there's workers' compensation insurance available. And you can't sue the coworker who may have caused your injury, but you could sue someone else, like a different contractor on the site or property owner if that's not your employer, or some other entity
Product
that's
liability.
involved. Right, product liability can occur. Could you tell us about those cases, those types of
Yeah,
cases?
well,
Rob?
again, you're talking about the necessity to have a third party. Third party meaning not the employer or a co-employee. Now, there's one exception. Now, intentional injuries. If your boss comes up and hits you in the head with a stick, yeah, you can bring a lawsuit. You're not limited to workers' compensation in that situation. But you actually have an election. You can go either way.
Right.
But the only other situation is when the employer doesn't provide insurance. So again, you got to look for a third party who's responsible, someone that's negligent, and often happens on a car accident situation where the accident occurs off the premises. Negligence of another party, just the same as any other lawsuit.
Right.
The only difference there, of course, is workers' compensation will pay for lost wages and medical. But in a car accident situation, otherwise it would just be no fault for that first period of time.
Right.
Now you've got the intersect between,
You and I have done this.
yes,
yeah.
for sure, and between workers' compensation, which is primary, and no fault, which picks up from anything that compensation doesn't cover.
Right. And we've handled these cases
Yeah.
together where you have somebody who's injured in a car accident while working. So they get workers' compensation, but the workers' compensation insurance company is responsible for only up to 2/3 of the individual's lost wage. Meanwhile, no fault, which is an insurance benefit available through the car insurance, offers 80% of the lost wage. So there's about a 16.666% difference. And, you help your clients get that 2/3, and then, you're kind enough to send a lot of your work our way. And then we help pick up that slack and prosecute a third party claim, thereby maximizing that injured worker's total benefit profile. And I have to say, the car insurance companies, they hate that. They think that they're off the hook, and then all of a sudden Basch Keegan files that claim for that 16%. And most do it, but begrudgingly, and I think they're shocked oftentimes. I don't think a lot of lawyers would even bother, because we don't really charge for that. That's just part of the service. This third party benefit in addition to the workers' compensation claim, I always tell people, if you're injured at work and there is a third party that you can go after for justice, you get 2 lawyers, right? And you get a workers' compensation attorney who specializes in their realm of workers' compensation claims, and they advocate for the injured worker in front of the workers' compensation board, right? And against the workers' compensation insurance company. And then you get a personal injury lawyer who advocates for you against the wrongdoer, the negligent party, and their liability insurance companies. And you want to pick 2 lawyers who communicate well with one another and work together, not for their own interests, but the interest of the injured person. And we're constantly, our office and yours, communicating, what are you doing over there? How's this going to affect this claim? And here's what I got going on. And we're always talking about not us, but the injured worker.
Of course.
And I think that's really important, and those people should know. You can have 2 advocates fighting for you.
No question. And if you think about it, I mean, again, a person gets injured, whether it's in an automobile or otherwise, they need wage loss replacement if they're losing time. This is something that workers' compensation can provide, and fairly quickly. It takes about 3 weeks to get the first payment of compensation. Okay. And there's a reason. First of all, if you only lose 7 days, 1 week, it's a waiting period and you don't get paid. But if you lose over 14 days, there's no waiting period. Namely, it goes right back to day one. And so basically, it's a couple of weeks into the claim before the insurance company knows, gee, are they paying from day one or day 8? Okay. And it also takes time for the medical report to be there, for them to contact the employer and confirm what their wages are.
Right. It's a verification period.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, I don't like insurance companies. None of us care for them, but I understand that. They got to verify the claim. But what I like about workers' compensation that I think is different than no fault, it's a workers' compensation plan, right? The idea is to compensate the worker. And that seems more noble in spirit than no fault to me. But, I guess it's the same concept.
During the whole practice, John, it's kind of interesting. Before your time, actually, it was the American Arbitration Association that arbitrated no-fault cases.
Is that right?
And I joined the American Arbitration Association for that very purpose. It certainly wasn't the $75 or so that they paid me to arbitrate a case.
Really?
It enabled me, in fact, to have local counsel, local injured workers come before me when they weren't getting paid no fault. And they got paid their no fault after that. And again, another opportunity to intersect and interact with the third party attorneys in Ulster County. And, their clients deserve justice. Yeah. In that situation, I could play judge.
That is cool. I think that's cool. I always wonder if Derek and I are going to end up on some town bench or something, or just to be a judge for once, and arbitrate.
Change the scenery.
Derek and I recently, I don't know, maybe your opinion has changed. This is like an aside, but we've been frustrated with the American Arbitration Association.
Yeah, they're more difficult lately for whatever
corporate
reason. Right. Yeah, we try to avoid them.
Well, do you have local hearings for American for arbitration? No, you have to travel.
Digital now, or you have to travel down to like Nyack.
Nyack, and there was someone north of Albany, and
the wait times it
would take forever. It was hard. It was easier just to file a lawsuit. And now there's the option. Certain contracts, I suppose, have clauses in them that mandate arbitration. But with no fault, you have the option of suing the no fault insurance company or going to arbitration. Right. Same with the underinsured and uninsured claims. And I never go to AAA anymore. I always sue them. I'm better off with a lawsuit.
The other thing too is that they're selecting these arbitrators who aren't specialists in that body of law.
Yeah, they don't know the law.
I recently arbitrated this big sum claim, personal injury threat. It wasn't a threshold case, but we have to prove the threshold. And this lady does real estate transactions, and I said. Yeah. I wrote a complaint, and they promised I would never get that arbitrator again. But so it was just that was an aside.
Well, no, and honestly, there's a question of whether a given attorney, wants to be an arbitrator. Well, nobody really wants to. Look, if you can make money in the real world, if you can actually make money by representing people, you do not want to be a mediator or an arbitrator. I mean, other than if you for the social or for the the laudable function of trying to help people.
Yeah. I think there are
money's
some
not there
now who are making a living doing it, but they're also approaching their golden years. And it's a nice way to not have to be as competitive and
Let's talk about liens for a moment.
Sure.
So if someone is injured at work and we have their personal injury case, if we get a recovery for them, but they've also recovered money from the workers' compensation carrier for their wages and medical bills, could you explain to us what the workers' compensation carrier is entitled to recover?
Of course. Well, again, what we do is on the front end of a case, pay for lost wages or make sure that lost wages are paid. And again, it's 2/3 of the gross pay on a tax-free basis. So they take the 52-week period before the accident. What was the person's average gross income during that period? That's their average weekly wage. 2/3 of that amount they get tax-free if they're totally disabled. Now, we try to get wage loss replacement and medical bills paid. That also represents part of your third-party claim. So the law does not like double recovery. And that's exactly what the lien is. When you settle your case, the compensation carrier want their money back. And Section 29 of the workers' compensation law allows for that and, in fact, requires it. Now, they're entitled to get that back. And, at that point in time, when you settle, they look to recover what they paid to date. And they have to pay their fair share of the litigation costs. So if whatever contingent fee and part of the disbursements the amount represents, they have to pay that. They only get about 2/3 or a little bit less back. But the interesting part of lien, the other side of the coin is offset. Okay, not only does the workers' compensation carrier get to get their money back, but they get to stop future payments of lost wages and medical bills because that's part of your recovery. All things being equal, namely if you've got very good liability on a case and if the insurance coverage is sufficient to cover the true loss. And again, your loss includes not only lost wages past and prospective, but includes loss of enjoyment of life, pain and suffering. The spouse could have a derivative cause of action because of their loss. There's your case represents in the ideal situation a claim for a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And because it's, again, commensurate with the loss. Now, the workers' compensation says, well, wait a second, you've been paid for your lost wages in the future, so we're going to stop paying you. And it took quite a while before the case got to the Court of Appeals, but they also said, well, okay, that's fine that you get to stop payments, workers' compensation carrier, but you got to pay for the privilege.
Sure.
And so as a result now, they basically have to pay that percentage cost of litigation, but to the injured worker. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an odd thing, but they get to pay a little bit more to the injured worker until such time as the unlikely situation that their otherwise payments of compensation would exceed what they got on the liability case, which doesn't happen very often.
I often tell my clients, because I think sometimes they struggle with the idea. It's like, wait a minute, the workers' comp is going to get a piece of my case. But I assure them that that's my job, is to take the lien into consideration. And oftentimes, but not always, it will help to inflate the value of the case because there's an economic harm that occurred. But thankfully, the injured worker did not have to absorb that economic harm. There was an insurance company there to keep them afloat. But if you are one of these individuals who is eligible for a third-party claim, as we're discussing, the personal injury lawyer's job is to take into consideration the lien and include that in the settlement negotiations. That we have to, I always say the bidding starts at something above the lien. Right?
Without question.
The bidding never starts below the lien. And so, we're aware of that. And we include that lien in the evaluation of the case because as personal injury lawyers, we want to make sure that the money's going into the individual's pocket. I know that the law mandates that we pay back the workers' comp insurance company, but they're the least of my concerns. So I always just want to make my clients comfortable with how it works. Now, there are times where the lien hurts. I mean, if you have awful liability, but big injuries, awful liability meaning there's not great negligence, can't prove negligence. Or you flip it, you have really good negligence with some injury profile that just sort of is nebulous, but they're out of work for a long time or something, and it's hard to justify the value that the
Or the insurance coverage is not there.
or there. That's another one. The insurance coverage isn't there. That happens.
So, like, the interesting part of that lien and its development, the amount that it is, to inflate that is one way of looking at it. Actually, part of our job is to make sure that that injured worker gets the appropriate medical care and treatment. And that means all diagnostic tests, all treatment modalities, whether it's surgery, pain management, whatever. Getting that secured for them develops the record. It indicates what is the true loss.
Oh,
and that's what
absolutely.
you need to have.
Exactly.
And that's why, we consider a partnership in a way between our office, our client, and the doctor. Now, see, the injured worker sees the doctor for two reasons. I mean, first you think of, well, they have to get diagnostic tests and treatment, that sort of thing. Yeah, but they also need medical evidence. And that's where a really good doctor comes into play. They provide medical evidence of degree of disability,
Right.
Making sure that any consequential injury that could occur, that's included. It's a full development of the record so that when it comes time for your claim to be put into on whether it's a trial or whether it's just a good medical report, the doctor's able to, concisely and indicate exactly what that loss means to the injured worker.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I think you'll agree, when you have a doctor who's advocating for the injured person, that makes for a powerful case. I mean, but not all doctors do it, but some are soft. But the doctors who believe in what they're doing for the injured person and they believe their injured person. I mean, when we have trials, and I'm sure you see it at your hearings, when the doctor advocates for the injured person, it's a totally different experience.
John, I used to do my own personal injury trials as well. And honestly, one of my best experiences, and I'll never forget it, is to see a true master. A doctor who's not only a good treating doctor, but is a good witness.
Yeah.
And honestly, I remember setting the foundation as indicating, oh, doctor, you treated this particular client, you did a diagnosis. And then stepping back with the jury and say, well, doctor, just tell us what this means to this person's life. And then he would take his glasses off and he looked like your grandfather. And my God, the jury was spellbound. And it was just, we settled the case, of course, immediately after his testimony.
My best results, my best verdicts were when the doctor impressed.
Without question.
Yeah. What else? Anything else in the workers' compensation realm that we think we need to cover? I did have a question because a lot of clients, I don't want to say a lot, but a fair number of clients, they get workers' compensation settlements. But I don't know if that's the appropriate terminology. So under what circumstances would someone who filed a workers' compensation claim get a settlement, if you will?
Sure. Well, with workers' compensation, there's essentially two different types of cases. One is the loss of use of an appendage. You hurt your shoulder, arm, finger, knee, hip, foot, that sort of thing. Even if you don't lose any time from work, if there's loss of range of motion, if there's some permanency, a year after the injury, there's an evaluation process by which that injured worker can get what they call a schedule loss of use. It's a percentage loss of use of the member, and it's based upon largely loss of range of motion, loss of strength, and there's guidelines that enable a doctor to do that evaluation. Now, the other type of cases is the whole body injury, head, neck, back, that sort of thing. If you don't lose time from work or have a reduction in earnings, those cases have a zero monetary value. They have no value whatsoever. They only produce a wage loss replacement if there actually is loss of wages. Now, on those cases where the person doesn't go back to work for a long period of time, the insurance company is required to pay them on an ongoing basis. Now, before 2007, that could be for the rest of their life. 2007 and on, they put a cap on the number of benefits. So depending upon the degree of disability, if you have a 75% degree of disability, at the point of permanency finding, you got 400 additional weeks of compensation. But if you have loss of wages, otherwise it's got no value. And those cases, the insurance company we're going to pay this person for X number of years. Why don't we settle it now? And they get what they call a lump sum settlement.
Gotcha.
And again, what's interesting is that more recently, there's a lot of cases which settle with continued medical coverage. And then that can be key for a given individual.
I was going to say, so that sounds like the best of both worlds.
Generally it is.
Yeah, right.
But also, though, oftentimes what's interesting is there's medical guidelines which essentially determine what medical treatment the insurance company is going to have to pay for. There's this whole...
So they know in advance what their exposure is.
Well, they know what the exposure is, but essentially these guidelines, these treatment guidelines, give them a lot of ammunition to refuse treatment. And we have to, and they've even taken the attorneys out of that authorization process more recently. That's problematic. So if you can get the insurance company to buy out the medical, that's probably going to be for more money than they ever will pay, or
Sure,
or that the injured worker ever will see.
I agree.
So again, the settlement process is one that you, if you know what you're doing, you basically are able to assess all of the variables. You discuss them with your client, and you collectively with the family, you make the best determination you can and arrive at the best result possible.
But then if a worker takes a buyout on the medical, if they have other health insurance, they can still use that.
Yeah. Other regular insurance, yes, because it's primary insurance. Now, now Medicare is something that occurs if the person gets Social Security disability, they're disabled for 2 years, they qualify for Medicare, something they would otherwise qualify when they're 65 in general terms. But Medicare is a secondary payer. Medicare says, look, if it's a compensation case, if there's some other primary insurance coverage, we're not going to pay. So that actually is key to us getting a lot more money for the medical buyout, because they literally review what the likely future medical is, and it is that number that the insurance company has to pay if they want to settle the entire case.
Is someone who takes a buyout from workers' comp allowed to then go on and file a New York State disability claim?
Well, no. Well, New York State disability essentially is the first 26 weeks, $170 a week taxable.
Okay.
That's New York State disability. But Social Security disability under the federal program.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the basic requirement is if you either are out of work for a year or your injuries are likely to keep you out of work for a year, you can file that claim. There's an application process, request for reconsideration, request for hearing, and we usually find the hearing is the best time to actually, or opportunity to win a case. But the one thing I would like to mention, that's why essentially our office comes in at the front end of a case and the back end of a case. You get your client who's disabled, can't work for over a year, you get them a good settlement, a good chunk of money. We want to get them income. That's Social Security disability. If they can't return to work, we want the Social Security case, and we get them money.
I've been sending more and more. I love it.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
that you know how good that makes me look as the personal injury lawyer? I hooked you up with a great workers' compensation attorney, or vice versa. Your great workers' compensation attorney sent you my way. We get you all of the benefits you deserve in comp. We get you a good settlement or resolution on your personal injury case, and then we send you to Ralph Kirk's office to file a Social Security disability insurance claim. And now you have some basic financial revenue coming in. You have the security of what you've already acquired through the workers' comp and the third-party claim. And now Social Security, it has become sort of like the cherry on top for me.
Without question. Yeah, without question. And essentially, if the injured worker doesn't go back to work, they get the amount that they otherwise would get if they waited to the ordinary retirement time. So that's a key thing for, let's say, somebody who's 62.
Right. You're close. You were so close. Yeah.
And if you take the early retirement, you may get a 25% reduction.
Right.
You get disability finding, you get the full amount.
Yes. All right. Well, Ralph, we appreciate you coming and talking to us. You were great. But that's it for our case in chief.
That's it. Thanks, Ralph.
Okay, but thank you very much.
Ralph, are there common challenges or pitfalls that injured workers face when they're filing a compensation claim?
Yeah, often the employer does not cooperate and does not notify the insurance company and does not cooperate with the admitting that the accident occurred on the job. Oftentimes, it's difficult for injured workers to get medical treatment. with doctors who are willing to go through the filing requirements for medical reports. They are not used to taking medical histories or indicating that an individual injury occurred on the job or the degree of disability. If the doctor won't indicate the person's disabled, then they're just not going to have an easy time. And that's why we...
a new doctor at that point. Find what that's
Yeah, well, without question. So one of the things, and I didn't mention earlier, was the need to get an out of work note. If you go to urgent care or the emergency room, get the doctor to give you an out of work note. That will.
It's the same for us too. After a car accident or fall, if you're out of work, just get the note. Ask the doctor, and they'll always write it for you if you actually are disabled, of course.
And give a copy to your lawyer.
Yes.
I
love people that they're like, oh yeah, I got a disability note. Where is it? It's at home. Am I ever going to see that? You know.
Or I gave it to my employer and I don't have it anymore.
Right, it's going to the abyss. Right. And you know, I think, like we say, make copies, right? I always say, make me a copy of all of your disability notes. Make me a copy of your New York State short-term disability application. That stuff is important for me to have. And you could understand how the employee was in a bind because like they didn't have copy machines, and if the employer won't make them one, then what are they going to do? Now with cell phones, there's no excuse. Take a picture as soon as you have that thing, and we will take that. Like that's good.
Yeah,
my files are full of pictures taken by my clients.
Text it, it's fine. It works.
People are becoming more, better at actually taking photographs. They really are, and
it's important. Ralph, Ralph, if someone is injured on the job, what benefits are available to them if they file a workers' compensation claim?
Okay. So 2/3 of their gross wages. So they look at the 52-week period before the accident. They average that. And 2/3 of that amount, up to a certain maximum, which is fairly high now. It's up over $1,100 per week tax-free that you can get from workers' compensation if your earnings are high enough. And what's interesting about that as well is if you've got two jobs, both jobs can be combined, your earnings for the 1 year period before.
Really?
And that can be pretty significant.
Even if you weren't hurt at the one job, at the other job? Really? I was going to ask that.
Yeah, the rules kind of changed, but now, in fact, the underlying insurance company, the one insurance company, is responsible. And we have forms to get that, to collect that information, to confirm the person was injured or we're working at that place of employment as of the date of the accident, how much they made during that 52-week period prior. And we have, of course, a disclaimer that this does not affect your insurance in any way.
Does the carrier get to subrogate against the other
employee? No, not at all.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so an example would be someone who, say, works at a doctor's office 9 to 5 and then works a couple shifts at a local restaurant waiting tables at night. That if that person got hurt while working at the doctor's office, they would be eligible to combine their two incomes.
That's correct.
Wow, great. That's great.
On a recent death case involving a person injured, a person who died as a result of defective equipment, he had two jobs. He had just started with the job where he was injured, and he still had the job he had before. Those two incomes together, concurrent employment, those represented a high enough amount to get his widow $1,125 per week. Now, they had a personal injury case. That average weekly wage loss of earnings projected into the future, which is what your office does, that gives the liability attorney a tremendous basis for which to make a claim.
Wow.
And
You're saying he did have one.
He did have one. In fact, he settled it fairly quickly at $5.9 million.
Whoa.
Now, mind you, we obtained for that widow what would have been $3 million over time. She was a young widow. The amount of compensation was high, and she would have gotten that for the rest of her life. As it was, when they settled the compensation case, the insurance company wanted a lien, but they hadn't paid much because the settlement happened fairly quickly. But they got to offset. They didn't have to pay her in the future, except for that 1/3. So her $3 million worth of benefits in the future still was $1 million.
Okay. Wow.
So
it's phenomenal, though.
Yeah, it's a good recovery. But again, over time, over what would be a 50-year period for this young widow.
Out of curiosity, what was the product?
It was a defective front end loader. It was actually a.
Is that recently tried down in Orange County? Or
No. This didn't even. This settled quickly.
Oh, you said
with
it
a
settled
lot
quickly,
with a lot of work that put the owner of that equipment, who probably would have been liable for punitive damages. He was so neglectful.
Wow.
So that was good. And another case, but kind of the average weekly wage and how one can work with that. Another death case, pizza delivery driver. Now, how much would a pizza delivery driver earn? Well, his W-2 earnings, which included the paper tips that came across with the credit card amount, came to about just shy of like $800. But there were also cash tips. Now, I'm not sure how much cash tips there actually are because people pay so much by credit card. However, we were able to work with the owner of the pizza place to get an estimate of the cash tips. And how was he able to do that? Well, we established that he also had delivered pizzas, and he could attest to the fact that he made about $750 a week on cash tips. Now, and he further could represent that he indicated that to the drivers that he hired as an incentive for them to come. So with that, we got over $1,100 per week for the widow and children.
Wow, that's good work.
That case is still pending in the on the liability case.
Wow, that's great. All right, well, that's it for Is It Legal? Now we're going to get local. All right, Derek, it's time to get local. So, what is your favorite outdoor dining place in Ulster County?
In Ulster County, when the weather is warm, I like to be down by the water, sitting outside by either at Old Savannah or Mariners, somewhere down on the Rondout. It's always nice. Ship to shore, you're not right on the water, but they have the outdoor seating there. So I think downtown Kingston in nice weather is a great place to be.
Ralph, do you dine out in Ulster County?
Hoffman House was always my favorite.
They did have a nice
Uptown
patio.
Kingston,
Yeah.
the flavor of the old Dutch community and the stone houses.
Yeah.
And the Bradleys, goes back to Vince Bradley being his brother Pat was the owner.
Right.
And they had great food.
They did. And you would go there and you'd know everybody that you saw, which some people don't like that. I do. I like that.
No question.
I will just say this. There's lots of great outdoor places. But I took my kids into Woodstock this weekend. We went to the playground and then we went to the Mud Club, which was really fun. It's on the one side, it's got bagels, egg sandwiches, croissants, and coffee. And then there's another little spot right across the yard, and they have, I don't want to say tapas, but they have food items and a full bar. And then outside are all these little gravel paths and really funky decor, and it feels campy. So there's fire pits, and there's great vegetation and trees. My kids had a blast. It was really relaxing. It was a cool day, so I had a hot coffee. Wanted a drink, but we had a lot of fun. So I thought the Mud Club was good.
Well, John, dicing still is a fan favorite. Okay?
We are there.
Yeah, we go there once a week. Feels
My
like.
wife essentially gave me instructions this morning to stop by.
Is that right?
Get loaves of bread.
What is her preference?
Well, I have to get multigrain bread and raisin pumpernickel.
Raisin
both are good,
pumpernickel is
and
delicious.
they're in my car.
Okay. I go to the gym in the morning, and I always have to check my phone before I leave the gym to see if I'm picking up dicings for the kids, bagels, hard rolls, whatever they may be.
Kingston is just, it just has such great restaurants. Always.
Yeah, I agree. I think the food scene here is great. Yeah. All right. Well, again, Ralph, thanks for coming on our show. That's it for today's episode. Derek, you want to sign us out?
Thanks for watching our podcast once again. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something, and that you're looking forward to our next one. And again, thank you, Ralph, for being on here as our special guest.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Ralph, for attending. Yeah, coming on the show. And don't forget, if you liked what you heard today, subscribe to our channel, give this a like. We appreciate you listening. We'll see you on the next episode.